Hello, Micah Hind here, just in the wilds of northern Scotland. It's fairly dreich and miserable behind me, as you can see. No castles here today, I'm afraid. Just big old houses like that one there. But since I'm up here, I'm going to be recording for you my playthrough of Princess with a Cursed Sword. So I'll just head in now and get on with that.
Hello again, it's me inside now in my mum's lovely house, and I am ready for our little playthrough. So I have my journal, very important for a journaling game. I have my cup of tea, not essential but useful for strategic British purposes. And I have my tarot deck. I'm using the Visconti tarot, which is the very first nice gold inlaid version, replica of course. This is the very first, or one of the very first tarot decks in existence before the mass-produced printed Marseille tarot. So the original of this was hand painted for some Viscount, I can't remember which one. But yes, this is one of the earliest representations of the tarot. Very fine illustrations, as you can probably see there. So with that, I shall bring up the one-page game and we shall begin. So I'll just read the blurb for you. Princess with a Cursed Sword, a solo role-playing game by Anna Anthropy, producer of many fine games, computer games as well, I seem to recall. She's done some twine games and such like. A figure stands in an ancient ruin, bare feet on crumbling stone, her gown far too fine, her sword much too dark. At a princess's coming-of-age ceremony, an uninvited guest gifted her a sword, then vanished, laughing into smoke. She cannot put it down until she finds the place it came from, so she has come. So before playing, I'm to make sure I have a tarot deck, freshly shuffled, but just so you know, I'm not cheating, trying to get my favourite major arcana or whatever. I will shuffle it again in front of you all. Cut. There we go. So, who is the princess? This is our starting off point. Who is the princess? And they asked me a few questions, so I'm going to answer those. I'm going to start with her name, which might be at first place. So I'm going to call her Princess Malia. What does her gown signify? I'm sure there'll be a little pop-up, or I can add one in later, showing you the art drawn by Rain Clar at Small Small Witch, if you're interested. She has a sort of slightly turned up nose, a sort of accepting expression on her face, sort of wavy ringlets, and probably hair that's brown or red maybe. It's in black and white, so I can only judge by the grey tone. It could be any colour at all, I suppose. She has a sort of slashed sleeves, puffed gown that seems slightly dishevelled, and an elaborate, what you'd call a long sword, I guess, or some people might call a bastard sword, but they're never actually called bastard swords. They are long swords, and it appears to have what almost looks like feathers for a hilt, interwoven feathers, but I presume they are made of metal or something, and what looks like a bird's skull emblem on the blade itself, just by the hilt. And most characteristically of all, she has bare feet. I think there's a question about that in a minute. So, Princess Malia, what does her gown signify? It has suggestions like her dual heritage, her humble beginnings, her house's unchecked extravagance, her religious studies, or something else. I think that her gown signifies her personal lack of practical understanding of adventuring. Next, it asks, why are her feet bare? Giving suggestions such as she might be in penance, it's easier to leap and climb. She's raised where there's no need of shoes. Highwaymen stole them, or something else. I am going to say that when the sword was gifted to her, a geas was put upon her. A geas being a sort of a ban or well, I guess not necessarily a curse, but certainly some sort of aspect of fate laid upon her, something that she must not do or must do. And in this case, I'm going to suggest that she has bare feet. To remind her that she came from the earth, and to the earth she must return. And that should she wish to survive this, a wise woman told her that her feet should always remain in contact with the bones of the earth. Okay, so the next question is, what does her sword want? Always a pertinent question when you have a cursed sword. What does her sword want? Does it want blood, secrets, to see beauty twisted, to call forth the dead, or something else? I think that the sword simply wishes to be returned to where it belongs. Nothing particularly amazing or creative there. But perhaps it will stop at nothing, or allow her to stop at nothing to get it there. And finally, and most importantly of all, of course, what are her pronouns? And I am going to say simply she, her, hers, because I'm feeling a little unimaginative there. And I cannot be bothered with neopronouns. Of course, those are perfectly acceptable if anyone wants to have them. Okay, chronicling the journey. So, as the princess explores the ancient ruins, I am to record her explorations, and I should write in third person, as though writing a fairy tale. In some parts of the ruins, you may decide the princess faces an obstacle, threat, or foe. In those cases, finish the passage after facing a challenge. There's a little sidebar about that. Whenever the princess is faced with a challenge, I should throw coins. I have some coins here. I have a €2 coin, and I have a £1 coin. And I should throw these if she's completely out of her depth, or if I decide her past has prepared her, or if she gives the sword what it wants. If you throw no heads, the princess falters and barely escapes with her life. With just one head, she achieves her goal, but it is tenuous or costly. And with 2 heads, she achieves her goal with frightening prowess. Okay. So I should keep the descriptions brief. I should ask what the princess notices, what she feels and remembers. The princess's own shadow mocked her, caricaturing her worst aspects. But she has faced far worse ridicule as a poor tailor. She extinguished her torch in her shadow and kept forward in the dark. Is the example given there. To explore the ruins, I turn over the next card in the deck, use the suit and the card image to decide what the princess finds. So, without further ado, I suppose we should begin. Princess Malia stood before the ancient ruins, shivering from the cold. The clay of the ground felt icy against her feet, but she heeded the old woman's warning and stretched and clenched her toes in the dirt. Before her, the ancient castle's oversized portal loomed wide. And so, steeling herself, feeling the blade in her hand, drawing her ever forward, impatient to return, she entered. So, the first card is the Queen of Swords. It makes suggestions of what she finds. White stone courts, a sudden noise, shadows and ghosts, precarious heights, menacing statues or blades. There's the Queen of Swords here, so let's combine a few things. Let's say that here she finds, in contrast to the stark shadows and ominous shapes of the ruins within, the scene is transformed almost even more eerily into shining white marble courts, slabs cut from checkered marble, pillars bearing statues, including one statue of some ancient, long-forgotten queen, the stonework pitted from age in the hand of the queen. She held a sword in stone relief, not unlike the one the princess herself held now. Sorry, I had to stop recording there briefly because of my mum. So there she stood, the princess, in this great open space, this court of white stone, essentially a quadrangle open to the sky, but all around surrounded by a roofed cloister clad with dark slates, and along the interior of the cloister were many portals leading off. So she felt the firm, unyielding marble beneath her feet, and not knowing where to go, chose at random, or so she thought. The sword, of course, was pulling at her, both body and soul. So next we have the King of Swords. Maybe I didn't shuffle this as well as I thought. So she chose the path in direct line of where the sword of the queen was pointing, some way off in the southwest of the square in which she stood. It led her down a corridor, almost disturbing in its clinical whiteness, carved from the same blocks of stone used in the courtyard. But this place was lined with still more statues, and each statue bore the face of a young woman. Each statue was carved with almost perfect realism, and the eyes seemed to betray longing or fear, desperation, hope. Perhaps every emotion the princess had ever felt, but none of them told her anything more. Still, she pressed on, feeling the weight of the cold, dead stone gaze of the statues upon her back as she moved forward. She remembered her own uncertainty at her coming-of-age ceremony as she passed through the corridor. All that was expected of her, the weight of those expectations, her fear at her own cluelessness. She didn't realize who she was or where she would be going in life. And yet, here she was, now, drawn onwards by the pull of the sword. by her fear of the unknown and the need to find the center of the ruins. A need which she wasn't certain if it was her own or the blade she carried. The Knight of Swords. As she reached the end of the corridor, a great door of black mahogany stood in stark contrast to the white stone all about. And just as she was about to step forward, the sword-bearing hands of the past seekers came down with a stark, grinding crunch. The blades met in the middle, preventing her passage. Who are you? A voice resounded through the empty hall. And with a grinding, crunching noise, the heads of the two long-dead queens turned to face her, their eyes staring impassively. Who was she? I think she's facing a challenge here, so let's toss these coins. Tails. Heads. Okay, so with just one head she achieves her goal, but it is tenuous or costly. I think that the princess has no adequate answer. I think that the princess, uncertain of how to answer, simply feels the stone beneath her feet, is glad of the grip and the surety of the ground beneath her, and gritting her teeth, she rushes forward, ducking just in time as the two swords swing, the statues moving with an enchanted speed, unexpected of something wrought in stone. She feels the stone blades unnaturally sharp, carved as they must be from some sort of volcanic glass, slicing through her beautiful ringlets of hair, several locks falling to the cold stone as she barrels through the mahogany door into Temperance, my first major arcana. So for major arcana, the suggestions are of what she finds: a shrine in disrepair, ancient rites, an altar, a sacrifice, a tomb, hollow voices, or the attention of the gods. I like the idea of a shrine in disrepair. I will say that indeed the statue matches the image here of Temperance, another queen or priestess or some long-forgotten woman in strange garb, quite unlike the princess's own, but again carved in marble, but this room has an air of damp and decay about it. Indeed, in the statue's hands are held two ornately carved jugs, and it's clear that at some point water poured from these as from some hidden font, some fountain. Indeed, at the base there is what must once have been a fountain, but now it and the statue are streaked with green algae, and there's little more than a foul-smelling, muddy mass of stagnant water in the bottom of this long-forgotten temple to moderation. She wanders forward, feels how dry her mouth is, and considers just for a moment drinking the foul morass in the bottom. But she resists. Temperance, after all. She simply looks at her reflection in the water, and she asks herself the same question the statues seem to ask her. Who am I? What am I doing here? But the sword had no patience for such philosophizing. It had no room for sophistry in its cold and sharp psyche. She felt it strain in her hands, drawing her forward. But to the left hand of two doors set in the rear of this shrine so long neglected, she sighed and stepped forward. Swords again. The Five of Swords. This corridor was completely dark, and sloping downward, the damp and musken mold was clear in the air. And she could not help but feel like she was walking into a tomb. She remembered when she was just a slip of a girl how she had been forced by her parents to attend her grandmother's funeral. In their castle, deep beneath, was the burial crypt where the bones of all their ancestors lay, and it too had that dank and musty smell of this place. As she descended 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps at the bottom, her feet met with icy cold water just a few inches deep, but causing her briefly to recoil. But the sword would not have it. On she pressed. She remembered how she had felt, as though she was about to be buried. She remembered the long shadows dancing in the flickering torches that they carried. She remembered seeing ghosts at every turn. She shuddered and pressed on. Right, this is ridiculous. That's the 4 of swords. I'm done with swords. I'm going to give this another little shuffle because evidently I didn't shuffle it very well. I thought I'd shuffled it well. But clearly my shuffling skills leave something to be desired. If I get one more sword, that's it. I'm done. Oh! Le Soleil, the sun. Die Sonne. Here we are, with the sun. It's a weird looking sun. Also, look at that tiny, tiny penis. Don't know why I decided to point that out. There you go. Okay, Major Arcana. Again. Oh, how appropriate. It suggests a tomb. So a tomb we will go with. A tomb indeed this place was. As she pressed on, the black blade of the sword began to glow with a very faint blue luminescence. And by the light of that luminescence, she could see rippling, glinting in the water that came up, halfway up her calves now, and all about, set in various crevices and sconces, skulls and long bones, rib cages, the remains of the long dead. The light was barely enough to navigate by. Time for another challenge, I think. Tails. Tails. The princess falters and barely escapes with her life. So, unable to properly make out anything in the dark, she chose a direction and stepped forward, but suddenly found nothing beneath her feet in the water. She plunged down into the icy cold, down and down, spluttering and sinking. She had never learned to swim before. She splashed and gasped and swallowed water and felt herself drowning. She felt the burning in her lungs. She felt the weight of the sword pulling her down. And yet she could not let go. Suddenly, she struck something on the ground, a stone which scraped and impressed itself. There was a distant, muffled clunk, and the water drained from the chamber. She awoke, coughing and spluttering, bringing up the foul water from her lungs. Somehow she had survived. But where was she now? Now that's better. 7 of wands, or batons. So for wands, it suggests dark halls, groaning wood, torchlight, yawning pits, glowing sigils, eyes in the dark, a locked door, teeth, or fire. As she recovered herself, the princess looked about. She was sopping wet and miserable, and still the sword in her hand seemed to mock her. And she hated it. But despite her hate, she felt the warmth of its magic, and disgusted with herself, she brought it close to her soaked and shivering body. Her unsuitable gown of taffeta and silk gave her no warmth, but the sword took the edge of the chill away from her bones. The chamber she was in now, the chamber she had fallen in, she supposed, down still further beyond the depths of the tomb, was dark. And in the darkness, she could see eyes watching her. Hardly she moved on. Oh, for goodness sakes, we're back to swords again. Right, I'm running out of things here to have. She began to run as fast as she could, and suddenly she stopped. Her feet nearly slipping on the wet stone, she found herself again at the edge of a deep drop. She could hear chittering and squeaking in the dark. She could not stay. Heads. Tails. Okay. Not knowing what else to do, she took a deep breath, a step back, and then a great running leap off the edge, hoping that there was something on the far side. She stretched out the sword and jabbed it forward. There was a great grinding and scraping as the sword sunk into masonry. She scraped down the wall. Her clothes were torn to shreds as she slid down the rocky face. The screeching caused her to wince, but more so the pain. As she impacted hard, twisting her ankle, she was flung free from the wall and tumbled forward. Her flesh was scraped and bleeding. Her fine clothes little more than rags. She painfully got to her feet and began to limp forward. She remembered being laughed at by her brothers and sisters when she first fell from her horse, her first day of riding, the shame that she felt, but also the determination, the urge to show them all that she could do better, that she could be more. Nope, that's more swords. Okay, here we go. Cups. 3 of Cups. Here it suggests overgrown gardens, deep water, well, I've already had that, creeping vines, a supernatural animal, strange dreams, lost souls, your own shadow. And as she thought about this incident from her past, she heard a strange snorting in the shadows. The glow from her sword revealed a shape. At first she thought her eyes were deceiving her, but then she made it out. A horse. White as the marble statues high above her. But the ears were tinged red. And she knew from the stories she had heard as a girl that this was a creature of the other world. No ordinary mortal horse. This horse belonged to the goddess Rhiannon, to Anuvin, Unworld, as some people called it, where the rules of life were turned upon their heads and nothing could be trusted. The horse snorted and shook its head, turned away from her and trotted through the darkness, hooves clip-clopping, echoing hollowly through this dark space. Knowing no what else to do, she pressed onwards, following it. The Empress. And she is looking very regal. And for some reason, she's got green hands. Don't know what that's all about. So, Major Arcana again. I think this time we will go for the attention of the gods. As she pushed forward, she heard once again a voice in her head. Who are you to have come so far? Do you bring the blade? Do you bring your legacy? Follow my servant. It will guide you through these lands. Two of bloody swords. Okay. Suddenly she heard a noise. Sudden noise, that's all I got left in swords. Nope, more swords. Cups. 7 of cups. And the noise itself was startling to the extreme because here she was, deep underground, who knows how many meters or miles down. But she was sure she could hear birds calling. Not the twittering of bats, as first she thought it must be, but actual bird calls. The sweet sound of the nightingale. The hoot of an owl. The twittering of a nightjar. And suddenly she reached out for the wall, felt like vines, and then a trunk of a tree. And soon she realized that she was in dense undergrowth. Here and there were beds with black roses growing forth. A garden overgrown and yet completely without sunlight. How these things could be growing she did not know, but she knew surely she must now be in Anuvan, in the other world, for in no other place could such a thing exist. And sure enough, all the birds of night were singing their songs, hooting ominously. It was beyond comprehension. And yet, there was the horse of the other world leading her on, true to the words of, it must have been the goddess Rhiannon. Who else could it be? So on she persevered, or cuts. Here and there she saw the ghosts of the past. Her cousin who had disappeared while hunting. She could be sure that she saw his face, pale and wan and speaking to her. But she could not hear the words that he spoke, only the urgency on his face. She saw the faces of children of the village beneath the castle, children who she had known, albeit never closely, for she was never allowed to play with them. Not officially, anyway. And there were times when she had snuck forth. But some of those children had died in the Great Plague just a few years before. She was sure of it. And yet here they were, their skin tinted green, strange and sickly and otherworldly. Some of them seemed to notice her, others did not. Some seemed lost and some seemed perfectly at home, laughing and playing in the boughs of these subterranean trees. Strength. Okay. She did not want to continue in this manner. Here, where the dead and the creatures of the other world all seemed to dwell together. She began to wonder if she might be dead herself. But she steeled herself. She took strength and followed the otherworldly horse to an altar overgrown with briars and thorns. Wincing, she stepped forward, accepting the pain as the thorns pierced her bare feet. She felt her feet to be wet with blood as she approached the altar. And there the horse lay down, resting its head upon the cold and overgrown stones. The Knight of Pentacles. There we have a nice white horse and all. And a fairly androgynous looking figure. It could be a man or a woman, or neither. So, pentacles, coins. Here is the first coin I've got. I'm excited. Tattered banners, an old library, grinding gears, a strange artifact, cloaked thieves, a caged bird, or guarded treasure. Okay, I'm going to say a strange artifact. And let's go with an artifact that's something like this disc. A disc of bronze sat on the altar, shining bright. Upon it were carved, spiraling symbols. It was a piece of treasure that belonged to an other age. The age before this age of men and iron. A bronze marvel, a work of exquisite beauty. It is yours. But the sacrifice must be made. She looked down sadly at the horse, which looked up at her without fear in its eyes, its neck exposed upon the altar. She could not do it. But the sword whispered to her, "You need this to proceed." And she felt it drawing her hand forward. With one swift motion, the sword slit the throat of the white horse, and red blood matching its ear tips poured forth onto the altar, overflowing it, flowing over the bronze disc, filling the curved and spiraling grooves within its surface. Sobbing, not wishing to listen to the last death gasps of the horse, she grabbed up the disc, and finding that it was in fact a shield with straps on its far side, worn but still serviceable, she slipped it over her arm and she ran forward into the undergrowth. Now I think maybe this has gone on long enough. And looking at this, in the entry for returning the sword, it says, whenever you reveal a card, ask, is this where the sword belongs? And if so, you should decide if the princess should make a sacrifice and what it would be to break the curse, or the sword would promise her something and she keeps it. I think we've kind of reached that point already, in that she has just made a sacrifice. So let's wrap this up. On severing the throat of the horse, the otherworldly horse, she knew now, the blood dripping down the blade, that this was where the sword belonged. Taking up the bronze shield, beneath it she found a crevice in the rock, and knowing that this was its final resting place, she slipped the sword into its sheath of stone, where it will remain in the other world until the next time a young and unsure ruler-to-be had need of it. You are yourself, the voice of Rhiannon said, as she had reassured many a young woman uncertain of her role in life. You are the shield of your people. and you will always be enough. With that, in this dark forest, she saw a light on the horizon, and the dawn. She moved forward through the bracken and brambles, pushing her way through the trees until the otherworldly sounds of children long gone laughing, of birds out of place singing their songs, the hollow, mournful hoot of an owl, the cry of the screech owl, and the barking of otherworldly hounds, the sound of the wild hunt riding across the heavens. She stepped out into the dawn of the woods on the edge of her home. The sun was rising above the castle, and finally the princess knew who she was. And that, as they say, is that.